welcome everybody to our little community of book lovers and cookie lovers. It's good to see all of you. I'm Claudia Cochran, and I'm the founder of Long Island Lit Fest, which brings best-selling authors to audiences for live and virtual talks. And I'm thrilled to be here for our second installment of our new Celebrations by Cheryl's Cookies book club. Cheryl's Cookies is part of the family of brands of 1-800-Flowers and was founded about 40 years ago. And it's known for handcrafted buttercream frosted cookies using great quality and wholesome ingredients. And everyone should have received their cookie sampler, hopefully by now, when you signed up for this event. I've got my cookies. And we even sent some to Lisa Jewell all the way to England. So before we really begin, just a couple of housekeeping. Oh, there they are. Thank you. Yum.
I had 40. I've now got 3. Just saying.
So a few housekeeping items before we actually begin. I'm going to talk to Lisa for a little while, and then Kasha is going to help us with the Q&A with all of you, and you'll have a chance to ask Lisa questions directly about The Night She Disappeared. We hope you all had a chance to read it. And for the best book club experience, please set your Zoom to gallery mode. And also, if you can turn on your camera so we can see you, that would be great. And then during the Q&A, raise your emoji hand, or you can type in a question or a comment in the sidebar, and Kasha will be sure to call on as many of you as possible. And now to our chat. Lisa Jewell is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of 19 novels, including The Family Upstairs and Then She Was Gone, as well as Invisible Girl and Watching You. Her novels have sold over 5 million copies internationally, and her work has also been translated into 28 languages. Lisa, we are so happy to have you here today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I mean, I can't believe that I get to promote my book and cookies at the same time. It's just amazing.
You have a lot of fans here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I was going to say that I think some fans may not have muted themselves, so I'm getting a lot of you echoing back from other people's. So that might be worth just everyone checking that they're muted, because I think that's
yeah. Thank you for saying that. Everybody should be muted at this point.
So, I think they are now. I think they have now. I think it's all quiet now.
Perfect. So before we get into The Night She Disappeared, can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming an author? I heard your first book was part of a bet of some kind.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, the chances of me being here talking to you now about my 19th novel were quite remote at the point at which I actually started writing my first novel. I was actually a secretary. In fact, not only was I a secretary, I was an out-of-work secretary. I just lost my job. And I was 26, just turning 27, and I went on holiday shortly after losing my job. And I'd had this kind of thing, like so many people do, that one day I'd like to write a novel. But in my head, it was something I would do when I was middle-aged. I thought only middle-aged women wrote novels. Young women like me, particularly not ones who were secretaries, they didn't write novels. I thought I'd have to go off and live a great and grand life first before I'd be allowed to do that. But as chance would have it, on this holiday, I just turned 27 years old. I got very drunk one night, and so did my friend Yasmin, and we were chatting about my future because I didn't have a job to go home to. And I found myself telling her that, in a dream world, I wouldn't be a secretary. In a dream world, I would like to write a novel. But obviously I couldn't do that. And I waited for her to agree and say, no, you can't do that. But actually she said, well, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just at least try? So she said, why don't you write 3 chapters? And if you write those 3 chapters, I will take you out for dinner to your favorite restaurant. And so we shook hands and we got home. We got back to London and I wrote those 3 chapters. And the same friend who made me the bet persuaded me to send them out to some literary agents. She said they were really good. She read them for me. And that turned out to be the first 3 chapters of my first novel, Rouse Party, which came out in 1999 and was a huge bestseller in the UK. It was the third best-selling novel in the UK the third best-selling debut novel in the UK in 1999, and yeah, and thus that's where it all began. So I'm very, very glad that I didn't wait until.
Oh, I think you're muted by accident. Lisa, you're muted by accident. You're muted.
Right.
There
yes.
we go.
Said host muted you. It wasn't me, promise. Anyway,
Okay.
I don't know. Did I get to the end of that story before I got muted?
We didn't hear the last sentence.
I think the last sentence was along the lines of, I'm glad I didn't wait until I was middle-aged to write my first novel.
So are we. That's so inspiring. What a great story. So you transitioned from fiction to suspense. So what prompted that?
It wasn't a moment of thinking, oh, I'm bored of writing. So my first few novels were romantic comedies. And it wasn't a case of, oh, I'm bored of writing romantic comedies now, I'm going to try something completely different. Because I've written a lot of novels over a very long time, and my career has sort of changed over the years. I kind of was a huge seller at the beginning, and then my sales slowed down. So there was less expectation in terms of the sorts of books that I was delivering to my publishers. So I was able to take a few more risks. And I was getting older, I was 27 when I wrote my first novel. Before I knew it, I was in my 30s. Before I knew it, I was married, I had a kid, I'd lost my mother. And, I just wanted to just keep pushing what I could, the sorts of things that I could write about. I didn't want to just write about romantic relationships forever, about 20-somethings sharing flats in London and, getting stoned and what have you. I wanted to move on.
Right.
So with every book over that sort of middle section of my career, I just pushed it a little bit more and kind of like moved a bit further away from romantic relationships and put darker themes in. And then eventually at some point I killed someone and the police had to get involved and in the book. So it was never just a seismic shift of like, that's it, I've had enough of that genre, I'm going to try a new genre. And I know some writers do that. They do literally, someone like Paula Hawkins, whose first 3 novels were romantic comedies. And then she made that huge jump from a romantic comedy straight into The Girl on the Train. But it wasn't like that for me. It was much more gradual.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about The Night She Disappeared. I'm hoping everybody or most of you have read it already, but for those who haven't, can you just briefly summarize it for us?
Yes, I can. So here it is. The Night She Disappeared, and that's a swimming pool. I'm hoping everybody's actually seen this in real life, so they'll know that that's a swimming pool. And this is the story of a young teenage parents, a young couple called Zach and Tallulah, who go to the pub on a Friday night and leave their baby at home with Tallulah's mother, Kim. And they meet some posh kids in the pub and get invited back to a pool party at this incredible mansion out in the countryside, just outside their village. And Tallulah sends her mother a text saying, is it okay if I stay out a bit later? We've met some people, we've been invited to a party. And Tallulah's mother says, absolutely, come home whenever you want. But Zach and Tallulah never come home. And their disappearance remains a huge mystery in the village until a year later. There's a boarding school in the village and a new head teacher comes to work there, and he brings with him his girlfriend, who is a detective novelist called Sophie, and she's exploring the grounds on her first day at the boarding school and finds a sign nailed to a fence with the words "dig here" scrawled on it. And Sophie, being a detective novelist, digs and finds a clue to the disappearance of Zach and Tallulah.
How did you come up with this particular storyline?
So I don't tend to start a book with any huge idea of what it's going to be about, or I don't have a shape or a concept of how the novel's going to pan out before I start writing. I have a couple of things that I'm really keen to write about. And with this one, it was boarding schools. Really wanted to write about I wanted to write a novel set in a boarding school. I wanted to write about this idea of someone finding a sign saying dig here and digging. and finding something. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, and I wanted to write about a teenage mother, because I've never written about, you get to this point in my career and there's so many things I've written about already. So finding new things to write about is always quite challenging. And with this one, I thought I've never written about a teenage mother. So those were the three things that I set out with. And then I just started writing and just watched where the book went and followed my own clues and leads in a way, just sort of 1,000 words at a time. Hello, Trish. And yeah, so I didn't have. Yeah, go on.
What was intriguing to you about boarding schools in particular?
Oh, I think it's that sort of. I like the idea of setting something in this sort of claustrophobic world, this little sort of micro world, where it has its own rules and its own hierarchies. So I just thought that would be an interesting setting. And I'd seen this beautiful boarding school once when I was driving through the countryside years ago. So I had a visual idea in my head of what this place would look like in this beautiful old building, in this gorgeous English village with weeping willows and a village pond with ducks floating across it. And so I kind of had it in my head. But actually, when I came to start writing the novel, because I freewheel my way through novels, and I don't sort of, just because I've decided I'm going to do something, I don't necessarily stick with it if it's not working. The novel sort of, having wanted to set it in this kind of claustrophobic crucible kind of setting, the story kept leaking out of the school. So actually it didn't end up being particularly set in a boarding school. It became much more a village setting. It became much more about everybody who lives in this village, and the whole community.
So how much research do you do in terms of the characters and the psychology behind the characters, and even like and the towns, the schools, or is that all in your head?
Yeah, no, it's all in my head. I come to the page with nothing. I've done no research. I've barely actually thought about what it is that I'm about to start doing.
Wow.
I'm not a planner or a plotter or a thinker, really. I don't really think. It all happens for me. I'd say 90% of what the reader reads on the page happens while I'm sitting with my fingers on the keyboard. 10% happens when I'm walking the dog or in the shower, or 10% I will have moments of like, aha, I know what to do in the next chapter, or I realize I need to unpick something that happened in the previous chapter because it's not working. That's 10%. 90% happens literally as I'm sitting and typing.
That's amazing.
So I don't research anything. It just sort of, yeah.
Wow. So in this book, the timeline goes back and forth from one year to the next. Did you write it like that, or did you write a whole year at once and then went to the other year and wrote that story and that plot line separately?
No, I wrote it in the order in which you would read it. And there's a very specific reason for that, because I can see that it's quite a sensible strategy to write each timeline separately, because then it's not so confusing. But because of the nature of my books, and I'm shameless in saying that I want more than anything for my readers to not put the book down. That is my main intention when I'm writing a book, is that they don't want to put it down. And for me, that is all in the juxtaposition between the end of one chapter and the beginning of the next. So whatever has happened in the 1,500 words of a chapter, whatever action took place, whatever conversations took place, is almost irrelevant, because the most important thing to me is what happens in the last paragraph, or even in the last line of the chapter. That means that the reader suddenly thinks, oh, I was going to shut the book after this chapter, but now my mind is spinning and I really need to know what the thing is that was referred to at the end of that chapter. And then I have to feed that very effectively into the beginning of the next chapter. So the reader gets the hit. So the reader doesn't think, oh, I should have gone to sleep, or I should have shut the book after all, because the beginning of this chapter is really boring. So I have to write them in the order in which the reader reads them, in order to get that hit, that little punch at the joint of every chapter end and chapter beginning.
Well, it's definitely a page turner, and that's exactly what happened to me when I was reading it. Especially like right in the beginning where she finds the little sign that says dig here. And then
Yeah,
I was like, oh, I was going to put the book away for, and go do other
yeah,
things, but I couldn't. I had to
no,
see what happened.
yes, and that's my cunning plan. It's absolutely my cunning plan. But actually, with this book, I was only ever going to do it from. So there are three timelines in it, as you say. Originally, it was I was only going to have the year the year after Zach and Tallulah go missing from the point of view of Kim, and then the year after Sophie finds the clue in the grounds of the boarding school. And that was going to be the structure of the book. But then I just got about 6 chapters into it, and I thought, we really need to hear from Tallulah here. I need to hear from Tallulah because I haven't got a clue what sort of girl she was or what she would have been doing at the pool party that night, what would have happened, why she would have gone there, what reason anyone would have had to have done ill by her.
Right.
So sort of, yeah, I thought, no, we're going to have to throw Tallulah into the mix here. And so I took it back another year so that we meet Tallulah. She's just started college after having her baby. Her baby's 3 months old, and it's the first time she's ever left him for longer than sort of an hour or so. And yeah, so I just jumped straight into her at that point. So yeah, we get these three different timelines going on.
Mhm. So let's talk about the characters a little bit. I heard you say that in your previous novel, Invisible Girl, that one of the characters that was inspired by the main character was inspired by one of your children. Was that the case with
Oh,
She Disappeared?
well, actually, the thing with the character in Invisible Girl, she was called Georgia, and she wasn't consciously inspired by my daughter. I just started writing her as Georgia, and I just got more and more aware of the fact that lots of her little foibles and ways and habits were very similar to those of my daughter. So I just embraced it. I thought, okay, I'm writing my child here. Let's just go with it. With this one, I think the more novels you write, the less likely you are to use people you know to form your characters. I think that's your books become much less autobiographical as you go through your career. And I have got to the point where there's very little of me or my family or my life or my history or my story in my books now. It's very much I take things, I pluck things from here, there, and everywhere, and it's very rarely someone that I know these days.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about Tallulah since we touched on it a little bit. Actually, Tallulah and Zach, because their relationship was so toxic, and as a mother, I was just so frustrated reading what was going on with the situation. So Kim was really clueless about Zach and what kind of person he really was, and he was living under their roof. And I just found that so interesting. How common do you think that is with
Yeah, I think it's really
mothers?
common. I think it's really common. And it was funny when I was writing it, I kept thinking, almost thinking out loud to my character, why are you not seeing this? Why are you not seeing this? But then I was in, so that there's an element of coercive control in the relationship between Zach and Tallulah. Zach is the same age as Tallulah, and they split up while she was pregnant, and then he's asked to come back into her life because he wants to help. He wants to be part of a family with his child. And it becomes clear in the early chapters of the book that his idea of being a family man is slightly stifling and controlling. Um, and I myself was in a very young marriage in my early 20s, in which I was coercively controlled by my first husband. And
Oh,
that's the thing. The thing is, you don't want anyone to know. And the reason why you don't want, oh, I just had echoing back in my ears. The reason why you don't want anyone to know, because if you tell anyone who cares about you and loves you, they're going to try and get involved. They're going to try and fix
right.
it. And you don't want anybody to get involved or to try and fix it because that makes everything worse. For me, I had to have absolute control over this awful situation I found myself in, and the idea of anybody getting involved or trying to talk to my husband or worrying about, I just didn't want it. Um, And yeah, so there they are. They're under the same roof as Kim, but she doesn't know. She suspects.
Right.
She says things like, "Oh, he has a bit of a, a bit of a short fuse, and he loses his temper quickly," but never with Tallulah, never with the baby. So that he's maybe a problematic person, but she can't see how that would have affected his relationship with Tallulah and the baby.
Right. And then also what I found was so interesting about Kim and that whole dynamic was that she was also unaware of Scarlett's existence and how Scarlett was impacting Tallulah's life. And so you just wanted to scream at Kim, like, wake up, lady, like all these things are going on in your daughter's life and you really have no clue. And I thought it seemed like Kim and Tallulah were close, but really then they weren't, right?
They were so close, and that was the weird dichotomy. They were so close, yet, as you say, there were these two massive things happening in her child's life, and she didn't know about either of them. But children can hide so much from their parents if they choose to. If they choose to, they can hide so much. And I think it's worth mentioning at this point who Scarlett is. So Scarlett is so when Tallulah starts at college, when her baby is 3 months old, she sees this girl across the lunchroom and finds her intriguing and fascinating. And this girl is very, very posh. She used to go to the boarding school in Tallulah's village. And she is surrounded by a sort of sea of like hangers on and groupies. Everywhere Scarlett goes, everybody follows. She's got this sort of weird power that she exerts over everybody, not just her contemporaries, not just her peers, but anybody who comes into contact with her. And Scarlett and Tallulah form a friendship, quite a very unexpected friendship, because they're polar opposites. They have nothing in common whatsoever. And yeah, that friendship goes in a particular direction, which then would probably explain why Tallulah didn't want to talk to her mother about it as well.
Mm-hmm. Tallulah's brother makes rare appearances throughout the story. Why was it important for him to be even in the book?
It really wasn't. I could have rewritten the whole book without him in it, to be completely frank. I don't know. And I dispensed with him quite quickly. I had him move out and into his girlfriend's flat in the next town along. It was just one of those things where, I had this idea of this sort of this family setup. There's Kim, there's her teenage son, there's her teenage daughter, and there's her tiny grandson. And that's where I started. And then because I don't plot or plan or have whiteboards or anything, I quickly realized that there was no place for Ryan in this book. But I thought, I could have cut him out, I suppose, but it just seemed easier just to leave him there. But you're the first person to have wondered about Ryan. Very observant, very observant. What is Ryan for?
I mean, we liked him. I certainly liked him. He's a nice brother.
A nice brother, he's a very nice brother. But completely superfluous character.
So now let's talk about Sophie. So she's a mystery writer. And so I couldn't help but wonder, are there any parts of her that are you?
Only her footwear. So Sophie is 33. And so we meet Sophie in late August, when she's just moved to this amazing boarding school in the countryside with her boyfriend of 6 months. She's only been with Sean for 6 months. And they have just had this whirlwind romantic relationship, all lived in London because Sean and Sophie lived separately in London, and they were dating and they were having the most extraordinary relationship. And she suddenly realized that he was going. He told her right from the beginning that he had this job that he was starting at the end of August. And she suddenly realized she didn't want to do a long distance romance with this guy. She wanted to give it a bash. And she was at that age, 33, of thinking, this could be it. This could be my chance to find my soulmate and start off down the next path in my life. So it's obviously, and in that regard, nothing like me whatsoever, because I'm a much older married woman with children. She also writes cozy crime, not psychological thrillers. I'm slightly distracted by the screen. Hold on, I'm just going to change the view to gallery. That's better. Yes. And anyway, so she moves kind of on a prayer, a wing and a prayer, down to the countryside with Sean, and hopes against hope that it's going to work. But her being a detective novelist was very much a sort of afterthought for me. I just realized she needed a job, and I hadn't really thought about what her job might be. I knew that she was going to find something in the grounds of the boarding school, but I thought this woman has to have a job. And a job that means that she could just up sticks and leave London and come down and not have to worry about going to an office or whatever. And then it occurred to me that the perfect job for someone who's going to spend the whole book sort of floating around this boarding school looking for clues would be a novelist. So yeah, no, I have nothing in common with her whatsoever, apart from we wear the same footwear. That's it.
But I have to ask you, would you ever, have you ever thought about, being like, what would happen if you could be part of a real life mystery that you could solve one day?
Would love it. I am one of those people. If there's a drama going on the street, I'm there. I want to be involved. I want to know what's happening. Why is that woman screaming? Why is that person lying on the floor? Why is that guy running? I always, if there's a drama going on, I want to get involved and be part of it. And if I moved into a new house and found a sign nailed to a fence, I would be straight there, digging up and doing exactly what Sophie does, finding out where I'm trying to keep spoilers out of it, but no, I absolutely would. It's the same instinct that drives me to write the sort of novels that I write, would drive me to want to know more about. Do you remember in the olden days? Do you call them phone booths in America? Phone booths?
Call them what?
Phone booths. Those phone boxes. Yeah. When you would walk past one and it would be ringing.
Oh.
Yeah, and they'd be like, oh, and just your whole imagination starts firing off, like, who could it be? That's the ultimate mystery of the phone ringing in a phone booth. That's the same. It's that sort of instinct that kind of drives.
Well, I hope that happens for you someday.
Yeah, it'd be great. Particularly now that there aren't any phone booths. That would be even spookier.
So do you have any favorite characters in this book? Do you get attached to any of the characters when you're writing?
I don't particularly get attached to them, no. There are characters, some characters are much more fun and much easier to write than others. So I quite often find that my detective characters are quite hard to write because they have to, in essence, be good, unambiguous, unshady people. Unless I was doing the unreliable narrator, but generally speaking, they're the hardest ones to write because they've just got a job to do. Whereas the other characters, the ones that I can like lace with ambiguous traits and like, are they good? Are they bad? What's really going on here? Those are the most fun to write. In fact, I'm thinking there aren't really. I mean, Scarlett, I think, is in this book my shadiest character, but she's not one of my points of view. Yeah, so those are always the most fun to write. But in this book, with its lack of shady characters, because all that Kim, Tallulah, and Sophia all clearly good people. I really loved writing Tallulah. I loved writing her journey. I loved watching her from the start to the she goes through so much in the course of the year before she goes missing. So yeah, I really loved writing her.
Yeah. Well, before we throw this to Kasha so everybody can start, ask you questions directly. Just my last question for you is: Are you working on your next novel right now?
I am. I started it. So my yearly cycle is that I deliver my novel at the end of December. Then I spend January and February doing the major edits on it, the big edits, January and February. And then I start my new novel in March. So I started this one in March. I write quite slowly to start with, and I always take the summer off. So I'm really kind of only just getting back into it now. So I'm halfway through. I'm at 48,000 words. So I've probably got another 48,000 words to write before the end of December. And this one is a sequel to my 17th novel, which was called The Family Upstairs. So this is kind of a new thing for me, a sequel. It's quite challenging. It's yeah, yes, it is. So yeah, and so that will be out. That'll come out next summer or early autumn.
All right, looking forward to that one. So we're going to start the Q&A from everybody participating. Kasha, you can feel free to call on people if anybody has a question for Lisa.
All right, let's try Mary Lee.
Hi, thank you so much for having us all here. Lisa, I was wondering, how did the lockdown and all of that change your writing process with this book?
Yeah, it didn't. I still wrote in the afternoons with this book, and I still did 1,000 words a day, and I still spent 2 to 4 hours every day writing those 1,000 words. So from that point of view, it was exactly the same. The big difference was that I wrote this book, as I think I mentioned in the acknowledgements at the back. I wrote this book in an office outside my house. I could not. I am in awe of all those people who manage to run businesses and homeschool their children and do their daily workouts and all those things that I saw people managing to do during the 2 lockdowns. But I couldn't. I could not focus in this house. I could not work in this house. I could not do anything in this house. So I took some office space over the street and wrote this novel there. But still, it was the same daily kind of routine that I was in, just a different physical space.
Well, thank you. And believe me, I understand. I had 2 children that I homeschooled during this, and
I am in awe. I do not. I mean, I can't work out how people manage to do all that and do jobs and
lots of wine.
Lots of wine. Yes.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. And how about Stacy Bax?
First of all, I loved the book. My girlfriends and I were super excited to join the book club and get the cookies and talk about the book with you. This is very exciting. I quickly wanted to ask you, when you have downtime and you want to read a book and relax, what books do you generally pick up? Do you read suspense novels, or what do you like?
Yes, my favorite books are books like mine, basically. I love most of my favorite authors are British female psychological thriller writers like myself. Although the best 3 books I've read in the last few months are all American, actually. So that's just a rule. It's a rule of thumb. But yeah, I love suspense. I love psychological thrillers. I love domestic noir. I absolutely love reading within my own genre. I do venture out sometimes. Every now and then I think I should probably try something different. But yeah, it's what I love writing, and it's what I love reading. And it's also what I love watching on the TV as well. You know, the sorts of shows that I would choose to watch on the TV are all within the same genre too. I'm quite boring.
Great. And how about Rita or Retta London?
Hi, it's Retta. My question, I guess, was going to be a spoiler, so I've changed it. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I love the book. I could not put it down. I'm changing my question to ask, how and when do you decide the fate of the main characters? Did it come to you while you were writing it, or was it there in the beginning?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because actually the point at which Sophie digs, I had imagined from the get-go, before I started writing the book, after I'd had this idea of this dig here sign and somebody digging, that the person would find human remains. That had been my assumption. That would be the interesting and exciting thing to find when someone had gone missing, if you wanted to bring the cold case back to life. And then I got to the scene and I had her digging, and I suddenly thought, if she finds human remains, then we know that Tallulah is dead. And I don't know if Tallulah is dead. I don't want to know if Tallulah is dead. I don't know what's happened to her yet. So let us not find any human remains in that hole. Let us find something that's a bit vaguer and ambiguous and could mean anything, but just sort of sets the ball rolling in a way. So yeah, I never know. Particularly, I've written about missing girls quite a lot, and I never know whether my missing girls are dead or alive until I literally get to the last few chapters. And not just with whether people are dead or alive. I wrote a book called The Family Upstairs, in which the whole story flows from the fact that 3 dead bodies were found in a house in Chelsea, a baby upstairs, but we know that there were 4 teenagers living in the house as well, and that they all disappeared somehow. And none of them ever seen again. All 4 teenagers disappeared into the dark night, never seen again. And then I got to the end of the book and realized I had no clue how the hell they had escaped, what they had been doing for 5 years, how they'd never been caught. So then I found myself at this very late point in the day having to work out for myself what on earth had happened that night and where these teenagers had gone. So yeah, I do leave it all very much until the last minute, which can be quite chaotic. But it's always worked so far. Yes.
Very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And how about Kat?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for taking me and thanks for picking me with my raised hands. I finished your book yesterday because I saw this late and I was like, let me hurry up and finish this. So I really, really enjoyed it. I had actually 2 questions. One of my questions is, which of your books did you finish that you were absolutely like, this is my favorite, this is the best thing I've ever written, et cetera, et cetera?
I wouldn't go so far as to say this is the best thing I've ever written and this is my favorite, but the book that I was most satisfied with, the book where I got to the end and thought, that's exactly the book that I wanted it to be when I started writing it a year ago. That's exactly what I hoped it would be, and it is what I wanted it to be, was The House We Grew Up In, which was, have you read that one? Yeah. So that was, I just had this idea of this chaotic family and this woman with obsessive compulsive hoarding disorder, and something terrible happens and the family falls apart and then has to come back together again to clear out their mother's hoard, but also to heal the family and what have you. And it just all fell into place. And I got to the end and thought, yeah, job done.
Awesome. Awesome. My other question, I have with my good friend have a bibliophile podcast, and we do mostly like book to movies, movies to shows, stuff like that. Which one of your books would you like to see on screen if you had to pick?
Well, do you know what? Interestingly, I don't know whether the answer I'm going to give you is based on the fact that this is the one that's currently the closest to being on the screen. So maybe if I say this, I'm going to. So I've got 7 books under option at the moment. I've got one of my old romantic comedies is under option, and 6 of my thrillers. And the one that looks, to my mind, the most likely to actually get made is this one. Yeah. And the more I think about it, the more I think that this would be great on the screen. The setting is so lush, this beautiful English village in the middle of a gorgeous hot summer, a very rare English hot summer. And yeah, and all the gorgeous buildings and the swimming pool and Scarlet and Tallulah, and even down to like the huge dog, the St. Bernard, just there's so many things in it that I just think would just pop off the screen. And it's quite obviously kind of, bingeable if it was a box set. So yeah, that's the one I think.
All right, well, awesome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
All right. And Stacey Sachs?
Yes. Hi, Lisa. I loved this book. I think I read it in like 5 hours.
Oh, fantastic. I love it.
I could not put it down. This is one of the first books that I did not actually figure out exactly the ending.
Good.
Yes. My question is, what advice do you have for someone who is suffering from like writer's block?
Oh,
Good question.
that's a really good question. Right. So there's two types of writer's block. There's writer's block, which is an actual psychological condition. And that's something that can afflict a writer so they never ever write again. And then there's just being blocked, which is sort of vaguer and more common. So writer's block is actually a very uncommon thing to be afflicted with. So with the former, I don't know what I would say to someone who was suffering from full-blown writer's block, but for someone who's having a period where they're finding it hard to write, it's just, I guess for me, because I write a book a year, I'm contracted to write a book a year, and I know, particularly at this time of year, come October, I know that the clock is ticking, and I haven't got the luxury, I haven't got the time, I have not got the option of not sitting my butt down on a chair and writing something, and so how I manage that is by not caring about whether what I write is good or not. I'm much more fixated at this point in the process on just 1,000 words. That becomes my obsession. Is if I haven't written 1,000 words, then I'm stressed and I'm anxious. I'm not bothered about whether they're good words. I just want to write them. So I would always just say, just write anything. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. Just write 1,000 words. And just move yourself on to the next day. I'm a big believer in tomorrow is another day. So yeah, I don't know how helpful that is, but I have a very particular, obviously, kind of, what's the word? Anyway, I have to write because otherwise everybody shouts at me.
Actually, that is very helpful.
Yes, if you haven't got anyone who's going to shout at you if you don't do it, then just pretend, or maybe get someone to.
Thank you so much.
Good.
And how about Doris Roth?
Hi, this has been great. I can't get my camera to work. So anyway, thank you for calling on me. I had a question, Lisa, about the settings that you choose. I just finished The Family Upstairs, and I was so interested in the house, and I Googled it, and I found that there really is a house that's very similar to the way you describe it in your book. How do you choose those settings? Have you been to that house? And do people get bothered if people are kind of in their house or driving by? Or
I don't think so. It's a really, really good question. But so that book, like with this book, I had this picture in my mind of a dig here sign. With The Family Upstairs, I had this recurring image in my mind of a young girl, a child in a white nightdress running through the streets of Chelsea down the banks of the River Thames in the middle of the night with no shoes on. So I kind of thought, okay, so she's running away from something. What might it be? And I thought, well, maybe something bad happened to her in a house. And then I immediately, being a Londoner, I could bring to mind the sorts of houses that there are on that stretch of the Thames in Chelsea, these very grand houses that look straight over the Thames. So I kind of had a vague idea of what sort of house it might be. But then I could have got on the tube and gone to Chelsea. It would have taken me half an hour from where I live and done some research on foot, but I'm very, very lazy. So I just did a Google image search for houses on Cheyne Walk, and just sort of flicked through them until I found the one that looked like the one in my head. I was like, that looks like the one in my head. And in fact, the one that I found was number 6 Cheyne Walk. And I thought, well, I can't use that. It felt wrong to use the real address. So I turned it into number 16 Cheyne Walk, which turned out to be quite a historical house, which I think has with a really interesting history, and all sorts of famous people lived there, which I didn't realize while I was writing the book. It wasn't until afterwards that I discovered that number 16 Cheyne Walk had this very illustrious history. which I could have alluded to if I'd known about it while I was writing the book. But yeah, that's one of the downsides to me being not being a researcher and just sort of making stuff up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are we allowed to talk? Are we allowed to ask Trish? Because I love Trish. Can we, Trish Angeli?
Of
She
course.
hasn't got. Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, Trish,
that
go
all
ahead.
right?
Of course.
Hello, my friends.
Hello, Trish. How are you?
Good. Richie's right here too. We're in a hotel. We're in Pennsylvania.
Oh, you're always doing something nice, you two.
Yeah. So thank you. It's the group, of course, that we're with today on this is great. Everybody's fun. Everybody's funny, smart. They love reading. Love the cookies. I didn't get any. I didn't know about them. But I'm okay. I'm a big fat girl. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody. But so my question is two. Do you feel like you walk away making a friend when you finish any of these books? Like Oprah always said, like sometimes when you read a book, you get so involved that you feel like when you walk away, you're like, oh, I got to remember that person isn't real. And my second question is, do you treat yourself to anything when you finish a book?
Oh, I love that second question. The first question, no, I know I have a lot of author friends who do get very attached to their characters. And I know some authors cry when they finish writing books because they're so sad to say goodbye to the people who they've just spent a year of their lives with. And I don't feel like that. That might sound awful. I'm so fixated on finishing the book and moving on to the next stage of the process that I don't give myself that moment. I don't think like that. I just think I finished. I'm going to immediately write to my editor and tell her that I'm finished because she'll be so relieved. And then we can move on to editing. Yeah, so I don't do that. That doesn't mean I don't love my characters or feel connected to them. I feel supremely connected to them while I'm writing them, supremely. But I am very good at just walking away from them at the end of the book, which is why it's actually quite weird writing this sequel at the moment and bringing characters back from what would normally be death when it's one of my books, bringing them back from the dead and sort of giving them new life. Your second question, I do always buy myself something nice when I write a book, and this happened. This has been happening for very many years. I remember I was in a boutique in London with another author friend who'd had many more novels published than me at the time, and I saw a necklace, and it was £125 or something. I said, "Well, I can't." She said, "Didn't you just finish your novel last week?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, there you go then. Buy yourself the necklace." And thus started a habit that I've taken through with every single novel. I will always often buy myself a piece of jewelry to celebrate having finished a novel. I think that's fair enough.
It's awesome. Thank you. You know, we love you.
Yeah, and Trish, you know, I owe you a big reply.
Okay.
I'm going to send you that big reply. Love to
We're good. We love you.
Rich. Love to Rich. Have a
Yes.
fun night.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye, Rich.
Great. So how about now this woman, I'm sorry, you have your name as owner, but you're wearing a red shirt. Yes.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, my name is Millie, and I don't know how it came to be owner, but a couple of things. One, thank you. I haven't enjoyed a book like this in years.
Oh, wow.
It was wonderful, and the cookies are great too. But was it my imagination, or was there some sexual tension between Sophie and Liam?
Yes, there was some sexual tension between Sophie and Liam. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And that was something, as I've said, I don't plan and I just let my characters do their thing, but I give them lots of opportunities to do whatever they want, really. And with Liam and Sophie, I gave them the opportunity to have an affair or have an interlude or for something or a stolen kiss or something. I gave them that opportunity because they clearly found each other attractive. But
I was rooting against that. I was rooting that Sophie would not, but I felt that in the book.
Yeah. I think the problem was that Liam was 22 and Sophie was 33, which I think is problematic for a 33-year-old woman. You can find a 22-year-old man very attractive, but maybe maybe walk away from that. I think if Liam had been her age, yeah, there might have been more to it. And I'm trying to avoid spoilers here as well, but yeah. But
But
you
thank
were
you.
not imagining it. They did fancy each other. Yeah.
Okay, but thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And we probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. So Jennifer R., I see you've been posting in the chat too.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have two questions. My first one's rather quick. Have you ever created a character for one of your books, started putting the character in the book and said, this person doesn't belong here, and saved it for a later book?
Yes. No, I'm right. Yes. To elaborate. Yeah, so I started writing a book in 2002, and it was about this man called Dave who'd been married 3 times and had children with 3 different women. And I got about 120 pages in, and I realized I had overcomplicated everything. I'd set this thing up. It turned into a bit of a farce, and I felt like I'd completely lost control of it. And so I abandoned it and wrote something completely different. I wrote a novel called The Truth About Melody Brown, which could not have been more different to the book I was writing about Dave. But I was still very, very affectionate, felt very affectionate about him, and very wedded to the idea of writing about a man who made, such complications of his life. So I brought him back as Adrian in The Third Wife. So yes, he was Dave in another book, and then he came back 10 years later as Adrian. So that's a great question. I love that.
And my second question is, you said you're a reader. So if you could take over a character in any other author's book, whose character would you like to take over and continue writing?
Oh, that's such a good question. There is a book, and I've got a horrible feeling it wasn't published in the US, which isn't very helpful, but it's called Lie With Me by Sabine Durrant. It is superb. And it's all told from the point of view of this male character, and I can't remember his name, but he is such an unreliable narrator. He is so dark and so stupid, but so fascinating, and he's just the most complex, interesting person to read about. And I'd like Sabine to to write a sequel, obviously, so that I could spend some more time with him. But yes, if she's not going to, I would love to steal him and write another book about him. He was amazing.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
Give your great questions. So brilliant.
Well, that is about all the time we have, unfortunately, for our book club today. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say this was a really fantastic chat, Lisa, and we thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, well, thank you.
Say it all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Cheryl's, as well.
Absolutely, and we hope everyone enjoyed
3 remaining cookies. Yes.
We can send you more if you want.
No, I think we had 40. I think we don't.
Okay.
We're good.
Well, thank you everybody for being here today also, and please look for our next book club installment coming up in January. We're going to be announcing the next author really soon. Thank you all again. Lisa, Jewell, you were fantastic. All of you participating, excellent questions. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Really fun and really brilliant questions. I've loved talking to everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.